The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty outpost as Sergeant Maria Rodriguez checked her equipment one final time. At 26, she had already served 3 tours in Afghanistan, but something felt different about this mission. The intelligence report spoke of increased enemy activity in the valley below, and her commander, Captain James Mitchell, seemed more tense than usual during the briefing. Maria had joined the Army straight out of high school, driven by a desire to serve her country and prove that her small-town upbringing hadn't limited her potential. Growing up in rural Texas, she learned to shoot before she could properly ride a bike, thanks to her father, who was a veteran himself. Her mother, a nurse, taught her the importance of helping others even in the most difficult circumstances. The outpost buzzed with activity as soldiers prepared for what was expected to be a routine patrol mission. Captain Mitchell, a seasoned officer with 15 years of service, had specifically requested Maria for his unit after hearing about her exceptional marksmanship and quick thinking during previous operations. He trusted her judgment and valued her ability to remain calm under pressure. As the convoy prepared to move out, Maria noticed the worried expression on her commander's face. Captain Mitchell had received word that morning about possible ambush points along their planned route, but the mission was too important to postpone. They were tasked with delivering medical supplies to a remote village and gathering intelligence about recent insurgent movements in the area. The armored vehicles rolled through the checkpoint gates just after dawn, carrying 12 soldiers, including Maria and Captain Mitchell. The landscape around them was both beautiful and dangerous, with rocky hills providing perfect cover for anyone wanting to remain hidden. Maria kept her rifle ready while scanning the horizon through her scope, her training kicking in automatically. During the first hour of their journey, everything seemed normal. The radio chatter was routine, and the local civilians they encountered appeared friendly. Children waved from doorways while elderly men nodded respectfully as the convoy passed through small settlements. But Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched from the surrounding hills. Captain Mitchell rode in the lead vehicle, constantly communicating with his team and headquarters back at the base. His experience told him that the quiet morning might be deceiving, and he made sure all his soldiers remained alert. He had lost men before due to complacency, and he wasn't about to let that happen again under his command. As they approached a narrow pass between 2 hills, Maria's instincts screamed danger. She had learned to trust these feelings during her previous deployments, and they had saved her life more than once. The pass was an obvious choke point, exactly the kind of place where an ambush would be most effective. She keyed her radio to voice her concerns to the captain. The convoy slowed as they entered the pass, with each driver maintaining proper spacing between vehicles. The rocky walls on either side rose almost vertically, creating an echo chamber that would amplify any sounds of combat. Maria's vehicle was third in line, giving her a good view of the terrain ahead, while allowing her to provide covering fire if needed. Captain Mitchell acknowledged Maria's warning and ordered increased vigilance from all team members. He had served alongside enough good soldiers to know when to listen to their instincts, especially someone with Maria's proven track record. The tension in the convoy was palpable as everyone understood they were entering potentially hostile territory. As the lead vehicle rounded a bend in the pass, the world suddenly exploded into chaos. The distinctive crack of AK-47 rifle fire echoed off the canyon walls, followed immediately by the thunderous boom of a rocket-propelled grenade. Captain Mitchell's vehicle, which had been moving steadily forward just moments before, now sat smoking and damaged in the middle of the narrow road. Maria's training took over instantly as she assessed the situation. Enemy fighters had positioned themselves on both sides of the pass, creating a deadly crossfire that trapped the convoy in the open. The captain's vehicle had taken a direct hit, and she could see figures moving inside, but couldn't tell if anyone was seriously injured. Her heart raced as she realized her commander might be in immediate danger. The ambush had been carefully planned and expertly executed. The enemy fighters had waited for the perfect moment when the convoy was most vulnerable, trapped in the narrow confines of the pass with limited options for maneuvering. The sound of gunfire intensified as more insurgents joined the attack from concealed positions among the rocks above. The deafening sound of gunfire filled the canyon as Maria quickly analyzed the tactical situation. Enemy muzzle flashes sparkled from multiple positions on the ridgeline above, indicating a well-coordinated attack involving at least 15 fighters. The convoy was pinned down in the worst possible location, with nowhere to retreat and limited cover available on the narrow road. Maria's driver immediately pulled their vehicle behind a large boulder, providing some protection from the incoming fire. She could hear Captain Mitchell's voice on the radio, calling for backup and trying to coordinate a response, but his transmission was weak and broken. The damage to his vehicle had clearly affected their communication equipment, making it difficult for him to maintain contact with the rest of the team. Through her scope, Maria could see the captain's vehicle more clearly now. Smoke was pouring from the engine compartment, and the front windshield had been completely shattered by the rocket attack. She caught glimpses of movement inside, but the heavy gunfire from above made it impossible for anyone to exit safely. The other soldiers in the convoy were returning fire, but they were outnumbered and in a disadvantageous position. The enemy fighters had chosen their ambush site perfectly. The high ground gave them clear lines of sight to the entire convoy, while the rocky terrain provided excellent cover from return fire. Maria realized that conventional tactics wouldn't work in this situation. Someone needed to take decisive action quickly, or the entire team would be trapped until enemy reinforcements arrived. Captain Mitchell's vehicle suddenly lurched forward as the driver attempted to move to better cover, but the damaged engine died after just a few yards. Maria watched in horror as enemy fire intensified, focusing specifically on the disabled lead vehicle. She could see muzzle flashes from at least 6 different positions, all targeting her commander's location with deadly precision. The radio crackled with desperate communications from various team members, each reporting their positions and ammunition status. The convoy's medic was trapped in the 4th vehicle, unable to reach anyone who might be wounded. Their air support was still 20 minutes away, and the nearest ground reinforcements were even further out. Maria realized they were essentially on their own for the immediate future. As she studied the enemy positions through her rifle scope, Maria began to formulate a plan. Her extensive training in mountain warfare and close-quarters combat had taught her to identify weaknesses in enemy formations. She noticed that the fighters on the eastern ridge were positioned in a way that left them vulnerable to flanking fire from someone who could reach higher ground. The terrain behind their position offered a possible route to an elevated location that would provide a better angle of attack. It would be dangerous and require crossing open ground under fire, but Maria believed it was their best chance to break the ambush and rescue the captain. She began calculating distances and timing, knowing that one mistake could be fatal. Maria keyed her radio and contacted Sergeant Davis, the team's second in command after Captain Mitchell. She quickly outlined her plan to circle around behind the enemy positions, while the rest of the team provided covering fire. Davis initially objected, arguing that it was too risky and that they should wait for air support, but Maria insisted that time was running out. The intensity of enemy fire continued to increase, and Maria could see that the captain's vehicle was taking severe damage. Bullet holes appeared in the armored plating with each passing second, and she knew that even military-grade protection had its limits. Someone inside that vehicle needed medical attention, and every minute of delay decreased their chances of survival. After a heated radio exchange, Sergeant Davis reluctantly agreed to Maria's plan. He would coordinate suppressing fire from the other vehicles while she attempted to reach the high ground. The timing would be critical. She would need covering fire at exactly the right moments to avoid being caught in the open by enemy shooters. Maria checked her equipment one final time, ensuring that her rifle was properly zeroed and that she had enough ammunition for the mission ahead. She also grabbed extra medical supplies from her pack, knowing that she might need to treat wounded soldiers once she reached the captain's position. Her hands were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. The plan required her to leave the relative safety of her current position and sprint across approximately 200 yards of open terrain while under enemy fire. Once she reached the rocks on the eastern side of the pass, she would need to climb nearly vertical cliff faces to reach a position where she could effectively engage the enemy fighters from behind. As Maria prepared to begin her dangerous journey, she thought briefly about her family back home in Texas. Her father had always told her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but rather acting despite being afraid. Her mother had taught her that sometimes helping others required personal sacrifice. Both lessons seemed particularly relevant as she prepared to risk everything to save her commander and fellow soldiers. Maria took a deep breath and sprinted from cover as her teammates opened fire on the enemy positions above. Bullets whistled past her ears as she zigzagged across the open ground, using every piece of training she had received about moving under fire. The rocky terrain was uneven and treacherous, threatening to twist her ankle with every step, but she maintained her balance and forward momentum. The covering fire from her team was precise and effective, forcing the enemy fighters to keep their heads down while she crossed the most dangerous section of open ground. Maria could hear the distinctive sound of American rifles mixing with the enemy's AK-47s, creating a deadly symphony that echoed off the canyon walls. Each second felt like an eternity as she pushed herself toward the relative safety of the eastern rocks. Halfway across the open area, Maria felt the sharp crack of a bullet passing inches from her head. The enemy had spotted her movement and was adjusting their fire to intercept her path. She dove behind a small boulder just as several rounds struck the ground where she had been running. Her heart pounded as she realized how close she had come to being hit. From her temporary cover, Maria could see the cliff face she needed to climb looming above her. The rock wall was nearly vertical and offered few handholds, but she had trained extensively in mountain warfare and felt confident she could make the ascent. The bigger challenge would be climbing while carrying her rifle and equipment, all while enemy fighters continued shooting from above. She waited for another burst of covering fire from her team before leaving the boulder and beginning her climb. The rock was rough and provided decent grip for her boots and gloves, but the weight of her equipment made every movement more difficult. She had to pause frequently to shift her rifle to different positions, ensuring it wouldn't snag on protruding rocks during the ascent. As Maria climbed higher, she could hear the battle continuing below. Captain Mitchell's voice occasionally came through on the radio, but his transmissions were becoming weaker and more sporadic. She knew that time was running out for everyone trapped in the convoy, and she pushed herself to climb faster despite the burning sensation in her muscles. About halfway up the cliff face, Maria encountered a section where the rock had been worn smooth by years of wind and rain. Her boots struggled to find purchase on the slippery surface, and she nearly lost her grip when a piece of loose stone broke away under her weight. For a terrifying moment, she dangled by one hand before managing to find a better hold and continue upward. The enemy fighters above seemed unaware of her presence, focused instead on maintaining their attack on the convoy below. Maria could hear their voices calling to each other in a foreign language, coordinating their fire and discussing what appeared to be plans for a final assault on the disabled vehicles. Their confidence suggested they believed they had the American soldiers completely trapped. As she neared the top of the cliff, Maria moved more carefully to avoid making noise that might alert the enemy to her presence. She could see the backs of several fighters positioned along the ridge, their attention completely focused on the targets below. They had set up their weapons in well-prepared fighting positions, indicating they had planned this ambush carefully and expected it to be successful. Maria finally reached a position where she could see the entire enemy formation spread out along the ridgeline. She counted 12 fighters in total, armed with a mixture of rifles and at least 2 rocket-propelled grenades. Their positions were well chosen for attacking the convoy, but poorly organized for defending against an attack from behind. She carefully positioned herself behind a large rock formation that provided both cover and a stable shooting platform. From this vantage point, she could engage multiple enemy positions while remaining hidden from their view. The angle also allowed her to provide covering fire for the convoy below while working to eliminate the immediate threat to Captain Mitchell's vehicle. Maria's first priority was to silence the fighters who were focusing their fire on the captain's disabled vehicle. She could see 3 insurgents positioned directly above the convoy, and their sustained fire was preventing anyone from escaping the damaged lead vehicle. Through her scope, she could observe that the captain was still moving inside, but he appeared to be injured and unable to exit on his own. The distance to her first target was approximately 300 yards, well within her effective range but challenging due to the downward angle and crosswind in the canyon. Maria adjusted her scope settings and controlled her breathing, just as she had done countless times during training. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her to squeeze the trigger slowly and follow through with each shot. As she prepared to engage the enemy fighters, Maria could hear increased radio chatter from the convoy below. Her teammates were running low on ammunition and still had no clear timeline for when air support would arrive. The medical situation was becoming critical, and someone needed to reach Captain Mitchell soon to assess his injuries and provide treatment if necessary. Maria aligned her crosshairs on the first target, an insurgent who was firing from a prone position behind a pile of rocks. She could see his muzzle flash clearly as he continued shooting at the convoy below, completely unaware that he was about to become the target instead of the hunter. She took one final breath and began to apply pressure to the trigger. Maria's first shot struck its target with precision, immediately silencing one of the enemy fighters who had been focusing fire on Captain Mitchell's vehicle. The sound of her rifle echoed through the canyon, momentarily confusing the remaining insurgents who couldn't immediately determine where the shot had come from. This brief moment of confusion gave her the opportunity to quickly acquire her second target. The enemy fighters began looking around frantically, trying to locate the source of the unexpected attack from behind their positions. Maria used their confusion to her advantage, quickly shifting her aim to a fighter who was manning one of the rocket-propelled grenade launchers. She knew that eliminating the heavy weapons operators would significantly reduce the threat to the convoy below. Her second shot found its mark, neutralizing the RPG operator before he could fire another devastating round at the vehicles. The remaining insurgents finally realized they were under attack from their rear and began turning their weapons toward Maria's position. She ducked behind her cover as bullets began striking the rocks around her, sending sharp fragments flying in all directions. The tactical situation had suddenly shifted in favor of the convoy. With several key enemy fighters eliminated and the remaining insurgents distracted by the new threat from above, the soldiers below began to press their advantage. Maria could hear increased radio chatter as her teammates coordinated a more aggressive response to the ambush. From her elevated position, Maria could see Sergeant Davis organizing the other soldiers to provide covering fire, while two team members attempted to reach Captain Mitchell's damaged vehicle. The suppressing fire from below was keeping most of the remaining enemy fighters pinned down. But Maria knew she needed to continue eliminating threats to ensure the rescue attempt succeeded. She carefully repositioned herself to engage another group of insurgents who were trying to flank the convoy from the western ridge. These fighters had moved to a new position during the confusion and were preparing to launch a coordinated attack on the soldiers attempting to rescue the captain. Maria realized that stopping this flanking maneuver was critical to the success of the entire operation. The western ridge was at the extreme range of her rifle, requiring her to compensate for both distance and wind conditions that were constantly changing in the canyon. She took careful aim at the lead insurgent, who appeared to be directing the flanking movement. This shot would be the most challenging yet, but eliminating the enemy leader could disrupt their coordination permanently. Maria's third shot traveled across the canyon and struck the insurgent leader, causing immediate confusion among his followers. Without clear leadership, the flanking attack dissolved as the remaining fighters scattered to individual fighting positions. This gave the convoy soldiers the opportunity they needed to reach Captain Mitchell's vehicle safely. Down below, Maria watched as Sergeant Davis and Private Johnson sprinted across the open ground toward their commander's disabled vehicle. The covering fire from the rest of the team was intense and accurate, forcing the remaining enemy fighters to keep their heads down. Maria continued to scan for targets, ready to provide additional support if the rescue team encountered resistance. The two soldiers reached Captain Mitchell's vehicle and immediately began assessing the situation inside. Through her scope, Maria could see that the captain was conscious but clearly injured, with what appeared to be blood on his uniform. The driver of the vehicle was slumped over the steering wheel and didn't appear to be moving, suggesting he had been seriously wounded or killed in the initial rocket attack. Maria maintained overwatch as Sergeant Davis and Private Johnson worked to extract Captain Mitchell from the damaged vehicle. The process was complicated by the twisted metal and broken glass from the rocket impact, requiring them to carefully maneuver the injured commander through a side window. Every second they remained exposed increased the risk of enemy fire finding its target. As the rescue was taking place, Maria noticed movement among the rocks on the eastern ridge. Several insurgents were attempting to reposition themselves for a better angle of attack on the rescue team. She quickly engaged these targets, using rapid but accurate fire to prevent them from gaining a tactical advantage. Her covering fire allowed the rescue team to successfully extract Captain Mitchell from the vehicle and begin moving him toward better cover. Maria could see that the captain was able to walk with assistance, which was encouraging news about the severity of his injuries. However, they still needed to get him to a safe location where the medic could provide proper treatment. The convoy's medic, Corporal Williams, had been waiting in a covered position with his medical supplies ready. As soon as the rescue team reached safety with Captain Mitchell, Williams began his assessment of the commander's injuries. From her elevated position, Maria could see the medic working quickly and efficiently, his training evident in every movement. While the medical treatment was taking place, Maria continued to engage enemy targets and provide security for the convoy. The ambush was clearly failing from the insurgents' perspective, and she could see some of them beginning to withdraw from their positions. However, several fighters remained determined to continue the attack, requiring constant vigilance to prevent them from regaining the initiative. The radio suddenly crackled with the welcome sound of incoming air support. Attack helicopters were finally approaching the area and would arrive within minutes to provide decisive firepower against the remaining enemy positions. Maria felt a surge of relief knowing that the cavalry was finally coming, but she remained focused on her mission until the threat was completely eliminated. Captain Mitchell's voice came through clearly on the radio for the first time since the ambush began. Despite his injuries, he was coordinating with the incoming air support and directing them toward the most dangerous remaining enemy positions. His calm professionalism under fire demonstrated the leadership qualities that had earned him the respect of every soldier in his unit. The distinctive sound of approaching helicopters filled the canyon as two Apache attack aircraft appeared over the ridgeline. Maria watched from her elevated position as the pilots quickly assessed the tactical situation and began coordinating with Captain Mitchell on the ground. The enemy fighters who remained in position suddenly found themselves facing overwhelming firepower from multiple directions. Maria continued to provide precise sniper fire while the helicopters maneuvered into attack positions. Her role shifted from primary assault to supporting the airstrike, marking targets and ensuring that no insurgents could escape to threaten the convoy from unexpected angles. The coordination between ground forces and air support was seamless, demonstrating the effectiveness of their training. The Apache helicopters unleashed devastating firepower on the remaining enemy positions, their cannon fire and missiles eliminating the last organized resistance from the ambush force. Maria watched as the insurgents who had seemed so confident just minutes earlier now fled in panic from the overwhelming American response. The tide of battle had turned completely in favor of the convoy. As the immediate threat subsided, Maria began her careful descent from the cliff face. The route down was even more treacherous than the climb up, as loose rocks and debris from the firefight had made the surface unstable. She moved slowly and deliberately, knowing that a fall at this point would be both dangerous and embarrassing after successfully completing her mission. When Maria finally reached the bottom of the cliff, she was greeted by cheers from her fellow soldiers. Sergeant Davis was the first to reach her, slapping her on the back and expressing his amazement at what she had accomplished. The other team members gathered around, each wanting to congratulate her on the incredible display of courage and skill they had witnessed. Captain Mitchell, despite his injuries, insisted on personally thanking Maria for her actions. The medic had determined that the captain had suffered a concussion and several cuts from broken glass, but nothing life-threatening. His gratitude was evident as he shook Maria's hand and told her that she had saved not just his life, but the lives of the entire convoy. The aftermath of the ambush revealed the full scope of what Maria had accomplished. Intelligence gathered from the scene indicated that the insurgent force had numbered at least 15 fighters, all well-equipped and positioned for what should have been a devastating attack on the convoy. Her flanking maneuver and precise shooting had disrupted their entire plan and turned certain defeat into decisive victory. As the convoy prepared to continue their mission, Maria reflected on the events of the morning. The experience had tested every aspect of her training and pushed her beyond what she thought were her physical and mental limits. The successful rescue of Captain Mitchell and the other soldiers felt like validation of all the years she had spent preparing for exactly this type of situation. The convoy eventually completed their original mission, delivering the medical supplies to the remote village as planned. The grateful villagers had heard the sounds of battle echoing through the mountains and understood that the American soldiers had fought to reach them despite significant danger. Their appreciation for the delivered supplies was mixed with respect for the courage shown by the convoy. Word of Maria's heroic actions spread quickly through the military chain of command. Reports of her single-handed disruption of the ambush and rescue of her commander reached high-ranking officers who recognized the exceptional nature of her performance. Such displays of individual courage under fire were rare and deserved recognition at the highest levels. Within days of returning to base, Maria found herself summoned to meetings with officers she had never expected to encounter. Colonels and generals wanted to hear first-hand accounts of the ambush and her response to it. Each interview reinforced the significance of what she had accomplished and the impact it would have on her military career. The official investigation into the ambush praised Maria's tactical thinking and execution under extreme pressure. Military analysts noted that her decision to climb the cliff face and attack from an unexpected angle had saved multiple lives and demonstrated innovative thinking in combat. Her actions were cited as an example of how individual initiative could change the outcome of an entire engagement. Captain Mitchell made a full recovery from his injuries and immediately began advocating for Maria to receive appropriate recognition for her heroism. He submitted detailed reports describing how her actions had saved his life and prevented what could have been a catastrophic defeat for the convoy. His testimony carried significant weight due to his own distinguished service record. As news of the ambush and rescue spread throughout the base, Maria found herself dealing with unexpected attention from fellow soldiers and military leadership. Many wanted to hear the story directly from her, while others simply wanted to express their admiration for what she had accomplished. The quiet soldier who had always preferred to let her actions speak for themselves suddenly found herself in the spotlight. The incident also attracted attention from military historians and tactical experts who recognized the engagement as a textbook example of how individual courage and skill could overcome overwhelming odds. Maria's actions were studied and analyzed, with lessons learned being incorporated into training programs for future soldiers facing similar situations in combat zones around the world. 6 months after the ambush, Maria stood in dress uniform before a gathering of high-ranking military officials and fellow soldiers. The Medal of Honor ceremony was taking place at the Pentagon, with her family watching proudly from the audience. Her father, wearing his own military decorations from decades past, wiped tears from his eyes as he watched his daughter receive the nation's highest military honor. The citation read aloud during the ceremony described Maria's actions in detail, emphasizing how her courage under fire and tactical brilliance had saved multiple lives. The official language captured the technical aspects of what she had accomplished, but could barely convey the personal courage required to leave safety and climb a cliff face while under enemy fire to rescue her commander. Presidents, representatives spoke about how Maria's actions embodied the highest traditions of military service and personal sacrifice. Her story had become an inspiration throughout the armed forces, demonstrating that heroism could come from any soldier willing to put the lives of others before their own safety. The ceremony attracted national media attention, bringing Maria's story to the American public. Following the ceremony, Maria was approached by representatives from various military academies and training institutions. They wanted her to share her experiences with future officers and enlisted personnel, helping to prepare the next generation of soldiers for the challenges they might face in combat. Her story had become a valuable teaching tool for military education. The transformation in Maria's career was dramatic but somewhat overwhelming for someone who had always preferred to serve quietly in the background. Promotion opportunities and special assignments were offered regularly, each recognizing her demonstrated leadership abilities and tactical expertise. However, she remained focused on her primary goal of serving effectively as a soldier, rather than seeking personal advancement. Captain Mitchell, fully recovered from his injuries, was promoted to major and given command of a larger unit. He made it clear to anyone who would listen that he owed his life to Maria's courage and quick thinking. Their professional relationship had evolved into a deep mutual respect that would last throughout both of their military careers. The lessons learned from the ambush were incorporated into standard military training protocols, with Maria's tactical approach being studied and taught at military schools around the world. Her decision to use vertical terrain to gain tactical advantage became a case study in innovative thinking under pressure. Future soldiers would benefit from her experience and creativity in combat. Maria eventually accepted a position as an instructor at the Army's Mountain Warfare School, where she could share her knowledge and experience with soldiers preparing for deployment in challenging terrain. Her first-hand experience with climbing under fire and engaging enemies from elevated positions made her uniquely qualified to prepare others for similar situations. Years later, Maria retired from active duty but continued to serve as a consultant and advisor on military tactics and training. Her expertise was sought after by various defense organizations and foreign militaries seeking to improve their own capabilities. The small-town girl from Texas had become an internationally recognized expert on combat, tactics, and leadership under pressure. The legacy of that morning in the Afghan canyon extended far beyond Maria's personal recognition and career advancement. Her actions had demonstrated that individual courage and initiative could still make a decisive difference in modern warfare, inspiring countless other soldiers to push beyond their perceived limitations when faced with critical situations. Military historians would later write that Maria's rescue of Captain Mitchell represented more than just a successful combat action. It embodied the principles of military service that emphasize protecting fellow soldiers and completing the mission regardless of personal risk. Her story became part of the tradition of heroism that defined the American military. The village that received the medical supplies that day eventually became a symbol of successful cooperation between American forces and local communities. The convoy's determination to complete their humanitarian mission despite the ambush demonstrated the military's commitment to helping civilian populations even in dangerous circumstances. Maria's hometown in Texas erected a monument honoring her service and the Medal of Honor she received. Local schools organized annual ceremonies remembering her heroism and teaching young people about the importance of courage and service to others. Her example inspired a new generation of young Americans to consider military service as a way to make a positive difference in the world. The equipment and tactics Maria used during the rescue became standard issue in training for specialized units operating in mountainous terrain. Her improvised climbing technique while carrying full combat equipment was refined and taught to soldiers who might face similar challenges. Innovation born from necessity in combat often became standard procedure for future operations. Captain Mitchell, later promoted to colonel, would often tell Maria's story during leadership training sessions. He emphasized how her willingness to take initiative and accept personal risk had saved not just individual lives, but the success of their entire mission. Her example became a template for the kind of leadership and courage the military sought to develop in all its personnel. The canyon where the ambush took place was eventually secured and became part of a safe corridor for humanitarian missions. The tactical lessons learned from Maria's actions helped other units navigate similar terrain more safely, potentially preventing future ambushes and saving additional lives. Her legacy lived on in the improved safety and effectiveness of military operations throughout the region.